Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this particular webinar, which is part of a series of our Graduate Careers Month. It's graduates and it's also undergraduate. It's people who are engaged in higher education. And we're running this career month, this series of events for people to engage, to network, to find out about different career pathways from professionals, from people like yourself who've decided to forge those particular career paths themselves. There's no better way of hearing about different careers and what it might be like to work in different fields from people who've actually done just that. And the professionals who are working with us tonight are a group of people who, in many cases, were students themselves not so long ago, so know exactly what it's like to think about studying and embarking upon a working career, thinking about choices you make, why you make them, how you make them, etc. Let me introduce myself first of all, run through a few protocols of the night. My name, for those of you that don't know me, it's nice to see some familiar faces and also some new faces as well. My name is Emma May. I am, my job title at Work Avenue is Director of Operations and Employment. What that means from the employment side is that effectively all the services that we offer to anyone who's looking to find work falls under my area of responsibility. And the bit that relates to operations, Director of Operations, relates to the fact that I also work closely in the general overall management and direction of Work Avenue as an organisation. And for those of you that don't know Work Avenue, we are here to help anyone and everyone get a job and earn a living. And people earn a living in all sorts of different ways. And we help people right through from those who are leaving school, through undergraduates and graduates like yourselves, through to people at all stages in their working lives. You know, people change career at many stages through their working lives, and we can help each and every one of them. I'm going to ask my colleague Melanie to introduce herself.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you all for coming along this evening. My name is Melanie Pearl, and I am one of the employment advisors and employment programs manager at Work Avenue. I've met a few of you already on a one-to-one basis or for one-to-one appointments. So again, nice to see some familiar faces and new ones as well. And what I do is I help people to, along with my colleagues, to work out what they want to do and the best pathway for getting there, and then to have the tools for getting there as well, and also look at our programmes and review them and make sure we're providing the best possible service. I do that on a part-time basis, and the other half of the week I run an HR consultancy, so I'm often sitting on the other side of the table, so to speak, and helping employers to recruit and select the right people as well. So one of the things I do is help people to think like an employer as well. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. So let me explain a little about how the format of tonight is going to go, and it's quite easy. We're going to keep it always quite informal. We used to do fantastic student networking activities in person, where people had the opportunity to sit down one-on-one in a sort of speed dating type format, ask questions of professionals like themselves, find out about different career paths. Obviously, we can't do that at the moment, so we've headed into the virtual worlds to run our networking events virtually. We have 5 fantastic professionals who work in the banking, the property, and that sort of space on our call tonight. I'm going to ask each of them well, I'll be introducing each one individually, and each one will have, you know, a few minutes to kind of explain what's brought them to the point they are now and the career path they're taking. So they're going to take us through that. I might, or Melanie might interject with a few questions and qualifications along the way. If you have any questions for any of our professionals, I hope they won't mind me saying that, you know, if the question goes in the chat, then, you know, ask your question in the chat, and either Mel or I will be very, very happy to direct it to the person in question or the people in question, you know, and we can handle it that way. Also, there'll be an opportunity, an open forum in the second half of our hour, where people can just ask any questions that have occurred to them. It's a brilliant opportunity just to find out more, to springboard your thinking, get some initiatives, some inspiration. And if they've got any burning questions, please do ask them, because the chances are also, if you have a question, so does somebody else. So your question is unlikely to be daft. Sometimes we feel a bit sort of insecure about asking a question. Really, don't be. You know, your question will be a good one. It'll be a sensible one. Do ask it, and any one of the professionals, or indeed Mel and I, will be happy to address that. Okay, Mel, I don't know about everyone else's screen, but my screen seems to be fixated on you at the moment. And that's lovely, but I would prefer, if possible, to have the speaker pinpointed. But if not, just open it out to everyone. We'll have a look at that. Maybe it's not an issue. Anyway, I'm gonna, I think we'll start off in our banking space. Gideon, perhaps I can ask you to start, if that's okay. Is explain, you know, obviously what's brought you to this point and who you work for, etc. You know the brief.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much. So I work for Lloyds Banking Group, and I've worked for Lloyds Banking Group for 2 years. I, interestingly enough, having worked at a bank for 2 years, have only just started doing an actual banking job as of 6 weeks ago. So my career path to date was, I started off on the graduate scheme at Deloitte. I spent 5 years as a consultant, working primarily with financial services clients. So I worked with banks, insurance companies, wealth managers, and investment bank, doing various consultancy projects ranging from dealing with regulatory investigations to Brexit chaos and stuff like that. An opportunity then came up at Lloyds Banking Group to join the strategy team within their commercial banking practice. So I flipped across from Deloitte to Lloyds, and fundamentally continued to do something pretty similar. Thinking about how the bank can develop itself, and how to sort of generate new income and sell better products, and what products we should be selling to which clients, etc. But fundamentally, it was a business planning consultancy style job within a bank. I then thought to myself, actually, if I'm going to come and work at a bank, I probably should try and do some actual banking work. So have now just moved over to be a portfolio manager for clients where we have helped fund the purchase of the client by private equity firms. So I'm responsible for, at the moment, 12 businesses who are private equity backed. We provided the lending to fund those transactions. And fundamentally, my job is to make sure that we get our money back. Within that, we'll work with the clients, we'll monitor performance. Whenever these clients want to transact with us, I'll be responsible for ensuring that all the correct credit documentation is in place, trying to generate additional revenue from these clients, etc., etc. So really, for me, this is the first time I've actually been a banker, although I have worked in banking in one way or another for an extended period of time. My advice, if you are applying for these sort of jobs, is apply for all of them, right? Don't have your heart set on, I just want to work at Morgan Stanley or Moelis or wherever, or Peerpoint, if any of you watched industry. Apply everywhere, right? Consider other routes into it as well. So, for example, go for consultancy and work and aim towards financial services consultancy, right? If you don't end up with a banking job, but end up with an audit capital markets job, that could also be a very good segue into it, right? So there are multiple different routes into banking. And there are multiple different career paths within it. So whether it is actual front office client facing, which I'm doing now, or like the ultimate back office sitting in an ivory tower planning job, which I did 2 months ago, right, and everything in between. So there are huge numbers of different routes to take. But what I would say is, especially if you want the really, really sort of prestigious IBD, Morgan Stanley sort of all singing or dancing bells and whistles job, you need to really, really differentiate yourself from other people. And whether you do that through involvement with investment societies or knowing the FT back to front, right? These sort of things are not, they're not going to differentiate you from anybody applying for these jobs. They will merely put you on a par, right? So you've really got to be really clued up and interested and know what's going on. The final thing I would say is actually, if you do get into these sort of jobs, and you're looking for mentors or people to work with, or people not people to work with, mentors or people to ask for advice and stuff like that, there is a tendency to gravitate towards the most senior person in the room, just because they've got a very senior title, etc., etc. Actually, the people you need to be gravitating towards are the people who are 1 or 2 grades above you, because they're the people you're going to be working with day in, day out, and they're the people who actually understand what it's like doing your job and will be able to give you the correct advice. There may be points when being close to an MD at a bank is going to be extremely useful to you, but you're far more likely to get value from having mentors and confidants who are associates, vice presidents, associate directors, whatever, than going, oh, he's the most senior person in the room. He's or she is the most senior person in the room. They are the people that I should be speaking to.
That's really interesting advice. Actually, it's kind of echoed in our approach tonight, of course, and all our other sessions, that we choose to have people like you in the room, because you know exactly what it's like to forge a career, get into a career, and grow a career. And your advice is very contemporary, which obviously is very important as well. Very important. Gideon, thank you. I'm going to move on now. We've got a couple of other great organisations represented here in the banking world. Sharon, I think you're on the call. Sharon, can I ask if you're there, Sharon?
Yes.
Hi, Sharon. Thank you. Thank you again so much for joining us tonight. Perhaps you could do the same, introduce yourself, tell us what brought you to the point you're at now and the steps along the way, etc., and take it from there.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining tonight. So I work at Goldman Sachs. I work in private banking, specifically in the lending team. How I got here. So it's kind of been a ride of sorts. I was doing maths.
If we had £1 for every single professional who said it's kind of just happened and here I am, we'd be rich by now.
It is, and I think that's so. Everything that Gideon said, I would recommend you write down, and it's gospel because it's so true. The industries are so tightly knit, the opportunities, you never know who, what, how you're going to get your next big break. So in my example, I was doing a maths degree, and then the guy called me up from the careers department, from the university department, and he was like, oh, I see you're doing a maths degree, but actually your A-levels are good enough. If you want to join the business school, then we've got a space for you. So I said, okay, what's in the business school? And I was in SEM at the time. So I'm looking at if there's any women on this call, which obviously never really are.
There are.
But I was, yeah. And there was so I was in SEM at the time. And so he said, okay, actuarial science is the best degree we have, but it's boring people. So why don't you do a banking degree? Because they're quite cool people in it, but it's still quite challenging. I was like, great, sign me up. I had no idea what banking was. I went in 2007, which was the financial crisis. Had no idea what was happening, learned about it in classes, heard about all these banks called Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs, and meant nothing to me. Everyone rushed to get internships. I just kind of, anyway, you know, one thing led to another. And then I was like, at the end of the degree, okay, I really should get a job. I had been having experience. So my father's friend was some accountant at some boutique investment bank. So I'd been working there, you know, twice a week throughout my degree, but that was more for me to just get money rather than to pursue a career in it. But I would say to everyone, as like I wrote here like 4 points that are really crucial, is anything and everything, you need experience on your CV to get anywhere. They're always going to look at what you've got written before. So even if it's something like someone here has got their logo of B'nai Akiva, even if it's like group lead for B'nai Akiva, taught me teamwork, taught me collaboration, taught me leadership, etc. All that kind of thing is crucial and so important for the future. So it happened to be that because I had work experience, it was a tiny bit easier for me to then get my graduate job. But again, graduate job, I didn't know anything about banks. So I applied for everything, but I said, oh, you know, I'm going to apply. This sounds fun. That sounds fun. And I was very particular, and I was my peers at university said to me, these are the fancy banks, so only apply to these. And I, again, like would reiterate exactly what Gideon said, apply to anything and everything. But when you're doing your CV and your cover letter, obviously cater it to that particular company, find out about that company easily on their website and write some blurb as to why they are going to be the best company for you and why you're going to be the biggest asset to them. But don't be so selective, don't be prestigious, because you just don't know where you're going to end up. I ended up getting a mentor at university that was a management consultant. I became a management consultant, did that for 3 years, then got married, quit working, then rejoined the workforce after my husband realised it wasn't such a big deal for me to be working. And I joined Goldman Sachs because I knew, and again, this is like the second point I wanted to make, which is you have no idea all the people you're going to meet along your way, how important they're going to be. So always leave a good impression, especially as Jews. I'm like looking, I think we're all Jews on here. We're going to be judged a lot more just because we're Jews. So that's just the nature of it. And you're going to be judged, and so try and leave a good impression in general. I happened to leave a good impression on some random guy that I used to work with when I was a management consultant. So he said to me, oh, come to Goldman Sachs, you'll really like it there. That's how I ended up there. That was 2015. Where are we now? 2021. So I did consultancy there internally, and then I moved into the private bank because they needed the Israel and South Africa desk, the private clients, they needed someone who understood the culture, understood the screaming, bolchy, annoying, demanding clientele. And
you're not talking about Israeli people.
And so they'd left, so many people had just been crying from it that they, I guess they found out that I worked at Goldman Sachs and they asked me to move over to the team. I did that for 2 years. It was as terrible as it sounds. And then I moved into the lending team more recently. So I've moved around, but it's always been really in the banking space. And it's kind of been, so yeah, how I got my first role. And then it's kind of always stayed similar. You know, it's a lot of client, a lot of data, crunching, analytics, analysis, teamwork. I think that covers my points. Yeah.
It's very interesting. Thank you for that, Sharon. It's very, very interesting. I mean, the way you talk, you make it sound effortless. I just happen to do this. I just happen to do that. But at the same time, your advice is very, very sage. You say things like, apply everywhere, think really hard about the impression you leave with people. So actually, although on the one hand, you make it sound effortless, on the other hand, I can hear that it's very, very deliberate. And you've really thought very long and hard about forging strong relationships and almost leaving a trail behind you that is only ever a positive trail. because of the importance of that. And as you say, you never know quite where it's going to lead. To your point about networks in the community, network, I mean, this has come out in what you've said, and I think a bit in what Gideon said, and I'm sure it's going to, I can't speak for what's to come, but I would be amazed if I don't hear about networking. But the power of relationships and communication, there is nothing that will inform anyone's career and shape anyone's career as much as the conversations they have with people that leave positivity and energy behind them afterwards. And I think that also came out from what you said.
I had two more things. Sorry, I've just seen
go ahead.
here.
No,
I'll
please
be very
go ahead.
quick.
Please go ahead.
There were two more things, which is think about when you're applying, if that job is going to be there in a few years' time once computers take over.
Wow.
Yes. So that, because a computer can do a lot of jobs these days. So think about that. And then also, if you're planning to have work-life balance, my original plan was to be an investment banker and be really cool, but I decided I wanted a family, and also just really wouldn't have been acceptable in the Jewish world. So think about, from a work-life balance, like what would it look like, that career, once you're senior? Will it get easier, or will you still have the crazy hours still? That's it.
So again, for somebody who says that it kind of just happened, you've quite rightly, you have actually given it quite a lot of thought, and thought about where you want to be and why and how, and gradually have worked towards it a little bit. Would that be fair?
Yeah, but there's also like God, as in we all, there's destiny and divine, and
I hear you.
A lot of who I've met and how things have come about have been very much totally out of my hands, and it's just nicely orchestrated. But yeah, lots of crying as well. Don't worry.
Oh dear.
Okay, thank you.
Just have questions. Do you want to leave them till the end, or do you want me to?
We're in the middle of banking, so you might as well, Mel, just still, I can see it's, and some people have tried to answer, but why don't you just ask?
Sure. Okay. So one question that's been asked, just for anybody who would like to answer this, somebody's asked privately, how important is networking, and how does one network effectively? I.e., what exactly do we ask people when we network? Is it as simple as asking to be considered for a job, etc.? What's the trick to this? So we run at Work Avenue a networking workshop. We certainly advocate networking as a really crucial part of your job search, but very interested to hear from the professionals who've just spoken.
So I think from my perspective, and Sharon, please get involved and disagree with me, or I think in advance of getting a job at a large organisation, actually at entry level, the networking isn't necessarily that useful. That is my personal view, unless
because it's quite structured in its
unless your father's best mates with like a managing partner of Deloitte or something like that, and like you do hear these things, right? It's not really going to make a material difference. Once you're in the workforce, it makes a huge difference. And as Sharon mentioned, like one thing leads to another. You speak to somebody, you speak to somebody else. The next thing you know is actually you've got somewhere. What I would say is the best way to network is to do a really good job, right? You can go around and have coffees with people and be like hyper networky and whatever, right? But at the end of the day, you're going to progress by doing a good job, and you do a good piece of work for people, they will remember it, right? Or they may not, but right, as Sharon said, destiny sometimes plays a very important role in these things, right? And a job might come up in a year and a half's time, and the person who you did a good piece of work for a year and a half ago has changed jobs and is now the hiring manager for this job, and you go for an interview and he remembers you, and you're prepared for the interview and he knows you're a safe pair of hands because you've worked for him before, and the next thing you know is there you are, right?
Yeah, I was going to say that's very, very good advice. I'm keen to bring in some other professionals now as well. No, that's fine. It's brilliant advice. I couldn't agree more. Josh Bloom.
Hello.
Are you there? Hi.
Yes. Just to make a point on the, sorry, I was just going to say,
yeah, go ahead.
Just sort of from my perspective. So I work at Investec. Investec are a specialist private bank, but also a wealth and investment management firm as well. And I very much sit on the wealth and investment side. So my job title is investment manager, and my day-to-day duties is to manage portfolios on behalf of high net worth individuals, but also to manage the relationship side of things as well. I'm just going to touch back slightly to the discussion that was just made about networking. And whilst I agree that it is extremely important once you've got a job to build a network and progress from there, I slightly disagree actually in terms of networking before getting a job. And the reason why is, I think, because of how I've progressed through my career. I didn't actually join a graduate scheme. So I think perhaps for those who have joined via a graduate scheme, networking may not be so important because you follow a process, you do some online forms, you complete some tests, you go to assessment centres, and depending on whether they view you as competent or not, you will get the job, and then you develop your career from there. From my perspective, I spent too much time in my second year at university applying for internships, and I didn't get any of them through the big companies, and it actually was detrimental in terms of studying for my exams. And I actually came to the conclusion at the end of my second year, when I was on a 2-2, sort of a mid to high, that it's all great, you know, getting an internship, but also it's important to get the grades, because some of these firms set benchmarks in terms of what qualifications and what grades you need to have to be able to apply for these jobs. So I kind of put the graduate scheme applications to one side and thought that focused on making sure I got a 2-1 from Nottingham University, where I studied economics, and then use that as a platform to build on there. So in terms of how I got my job, I've always gone through recruiters. And the reason why I think networking is really important, even at this stage, is because if you want to be at the top of a recruiter's mind for a particular job that might be of interest, you've got to make sure that they know that that is what you're interested in, you have the skill set, and you want to be put forward for these roles. It's a similar case to when I bought my first property. I kept calling the estate agent every day to annoy them, so that when a property became available, I was the first one that they called, and it so happened. So my point is that yes, networking is important at any stage in your career, but if you don't go through the graduate scheme role, which is what I did, then making sure that you have connections with people such as recruiters who are paid to find people jobs could actually be a really good way into work without joining a massive graduate scheme. And just in terms of my particular career, I started as a trainee in the wealth management space because we are in a regulated environment like the others are. We have to set certain qualifications and obtain certain exams in order to be able to give regulated advice. So I'm not going to pretend that it's easy, particularly at a firm like Investec, where they require all of their staff to be the highest level qualified as possible. Perhaps at some smaller firms, you just need to meet minimum expectations in terms of what the regulator asks for. But there's a lot of studying, there's a lot of managing your workload whilst trying to allocate time to studying as well, and it can be stressful. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but I really enjoy what I do. I really enjoy the markets. I enjoy interacting with people and developing relationships, and now at a stage where I've got my own client book and just trying to grow it and just continue meeting people, developing relationships, and just try and grow the book that I look after at the moment.
I think that's brilliant. I think what is also so fascinating is to hear that, you know, ostensibly the three of you all work in the same sort of space so far, Gideon, Sharon and you, Josh. And yet your pathways have been your roles have been different. You know, as long as people do good, positive, strong things and keep putting one foot in front of the other, keep trying, keep applying, keep doing, keep talking, keep finding out more, you keep making progress and get yourself closer to where you need to be in terms of the job, and things happen. Very, very interesting. Okay, I want to move away a little bit from banking now and wealth management, and move towards the property world, because I'm sure there's people on this call who are interested in property. Benjamin Goldberg, are you there? I think you are. I hope you are.
As far as I know, I am.
Oh, marvellous. It's lovely to see you. Welcome to this evening. Maybe, so we're moving much more into the property space here. So perhaps I could ask you to do the same as the other professionals we have on the call tonight. You know, your pathway in, where you've got to, how you got there, etc.
So on the email that you sent, you asked us, to include any hiccups or anything
I did, yes.
along the way. So let me say that I
Are you
went
going
to
to start with a hiccup?
Oh yes. I went to Hasmonean, following which I spent 2 years in Keren Biavner. Then I went to King's College, read history. I was always going to be a lawyer. It was just foreordained. I did my work experience in a set of chambers. That was the way it was going to be. I went back to yeshiva after university, went to Kollel for a little bit, and at that point realized I didn't have the money to become a lawyer, because you need to go to, just in case you don't get it, you've got to spend time trying to get a training contract, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So on the Law Society's website, it says that if you can't become a lawyer, you should become a tax accountant. They're fairly similar. So I took their word for it, and I applied to all of the big accountancy firms. I got offered jobs. This makes me sound really impressive, at KPMG and at Ernst & Young. And I took the KPMG job. And believe me, there's nothing better than when you're sitting there in a room and they tell you that you are the cleverest people in the country, you're working in the biggest accounting firm in the world, you're amazing. There's just a slight problem, which is if you're not that amazing and you somehow manage to get in there and you're not stupid, but you're not amazing, and you don't actually enjoy numbers, you quit like I did.
I see, okay.
Fairly rare, I'm sure, to quit off a KPMG graduate course.
Not necessarily, but carry on.
Well, I was fairly honoured because I was called into an HR meeting when I told them I wanted to leave. The lady who had been training me burst into tears when I told her that I wanted to leave. And she said, we'll find you something else. And they took me into their facilities management team, where I did 2 years of facilities management, which was dull as anything, but I learned a few things. I asked them if there was going to be progression, and they very bluntly said no. So my next hiccup was I tried to become a property insurance salesman. It didn't work. I like talking, but in order to be a salesman, you've got to be fairly hard, and you've got to have a skin a bit like a rhino's, or whichever one it is that has a hard skin, because you tend to be turned down when you sort of talk to anyone and they look at you and they say, "Oh, you're in insurance," and they walk away. So that didn't work very well. But coming back to the networking question, I had done lots of networking, and at some point I heard that there was a job going in a property management firm called Lewis and Tucker. 7.5 years later, I'm still there. So I've been working, I suppose, in total for about 10 years. I've been at Lewis and Tucker for 7.5 years. I'm now I gave myself the title of associate director, which didn't exist before, but I quite like it. What do I do? I manage people's properties, rich people's properties. They own properties. We manage them. The exact definition of property management versus asset management is one which can be debated. I technically do both. I do asset management, whereby we try and make money for our clients. I also do property management, which is more dealing with problems. I want to touch, though, on that point about the networking, because it's actually really, really important in property. Property is extraordinarily networking based. The only way you will succeed in a property job is through having your own clients. The vast majority of property jobs, I would say the maximum of a senior property manager will earn 45k, which I know is a lot above the average salary, but since we've all mentioned it before, if you are a Jewish person living in Northwest London, it's hard. It is hard with a family to live on that. And the only way that you will actually make money is through networking and bringing in your own clients. That's been my experience so far. Now, to be clear, I'm talking about working in a small West End property management firm. I'm not talking about someone who goes through the graduate program at Workman or CBRE or one of these other ones, which is a lot more suited and booted. I haven't worn a suit for I don't know how long, and that was even before Corona.
Well, in fairness, I was going to say none of us have the masters. Yeah.
And it's it's extraordinarily important because in property everyone knows each other, especially the Jewish property world is very incestuous, if I can use the word. Everyone is feeding off each other, and it's very, very important to get to know other people within that space.
Well, that's very, very good advice. We have another property professional in the room tonight. So I'm going to bring in at this point Joe, if you're there. I don't know whether you agree with everything that Benjamin said about a pathway into property, or whether your experience has been a little bit different. You're working in a slightly different space in property. It's particularly nice to welcome Joe. So, you know, Joe has actually been one of our students, and maybe others have as well, I'm not sure, but Joe definitely has. So it's really amazing for us when people who had an original connection with Work Avenue as a student then grow their careers, launch their careers, become professionals, and then become up, you know, and sort of the wheel turns full circle. It's really nice for us, and hopefully nice for you as well, Joe. So I'm going to hand over to you and take us through your pathway now.
Thanks, Emma. Hi guys, so my name's Joe Rees. I'm a senior surveyor at Lewis Ellis. And yeah, it's great. I mean, I sort of consulted Work Avenue when I was at uni, just looking to get sort of bits of work experience and internships during the summers of my sort of university year, just to make the most of the summer, and also to get some sort of worthwhile experience working as well. And I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do when I was at uni. I had no idea at all. I thought best thing to do is just try a few different work placements in a variety of industries. Yeah. And a couple of those were in property, which I've now sort of been in for maybe 4 or 5 years. And I think the best thing to do, as sort of others have alluded to, is just to try a variety of things. I work for a couple of firms, sort of Heron International, which is like a residential developer, Investstream, which is more sort of on the commercial investment side of things. Those are my initial first placements in the industry. And I really sort of like I think I liked a few different things about property. One of them being that you weren't stuck in the office all day. You could sort of go out and about, go and see nice properties around London. I really like that side of things. And then similar to what Ben sort of touched on earlier, is that it's a very sort of sociable industry. You're always out networking, whether that's just for sort of drinks or maybe lunch events, but also sort of, you know, even meetings and sort of meeting different people at different times. It's a very sociable industry. So if you think you might have sort of good sort of personal skills and you like interacting with other people, then property is perhaps one route which you guys should definitely explore. And so I sort of did a few bits of work experience, internships, then ended up doing a master's in real estate, and then just sort of started applying to a variety of different firms, sort of the bigger firms where you do a 2-year graduate scheme.
Can I just interject at that point? You say you chose to do a master's. Was that because you thought the master's would make you more employable?
I think partially, yeah. I mean, I knew that in order to do the surveying qualification, which is called the APC, and sort of do the 2-year graduate scheme, you require the master's prior to that. So you needed to have some sort of real estate related degree. And since my undergraduate was just in business and it wasn't in real estate, I effectively needed to do the master's in order to sort of gain that level of experience. But definitely, I think the more qualified you are, it's only going to sort of benefit you in the future and make you more employable. So that's definitely sort of something which is worth bearing in mind. So I applied to all the big firms, sort of CBRE, JLL, BNP, and yeah, I remember getting sort of many rejection emails through sort of my email, just saying the classic email saying that you've not been successful in this occasion. I'm sort of very sorry to disappoint you. Did however get one assessment day at BNP, and I remember this was sandwiched in between my two exams. So I had an exam during my master's, an exam on the Tuesday, the assessment centre on the Wednesday, and another exam on the Thursday. So yeah, it was a very busy week, but managed to do well at that assessment centre and get offered the job at BNP, which is great. Spent 2 years there, sort of doing different rotations across the property industry, and then qualified as a surveyor in November, which was really proud moment, really sort of great thing to do. And then I've since moved firms. I now work for a firm called Lewis Ellis, where I sort of do commercial investment. So effectively the buying and selling of commercial property, generally speaking, industrial, retail and office property. And yeah, I really enjoy it. It's nice sort of being in the West End location amongst other property people. And yeah, a very sociable industry to be in. And yeah, really enjoying it so far. I think one of the things that I wrote down, which others have very much touched on, is I wrote networking is key, and that is absolutely the case.
I was just going to ask you that point, to Benjamin's point about networking. Would you agree? And
yeah,
the answer, yeah,
definitely. I think also, as Benjamin sort of touched on, in property more so than any other industry, because ultimately you are dependent on the other individuals in that industry to sort of bring you business. You can't do it on your own. It's not like you're just sort of, you've got your clients ready and you're just, for example, if you're an accountant, you're not just sort of doing an audit. You need to actively network with other people in the industry, and yeah, that's going to benefit you in the long term. So that is the most crucial thing, I'd say.
Brilliant. Thank you very, very much. So, we've heard from 5 people who all hold very, very different roles in very, very related industries. And what's fascinating to me, and I'm sure it is to you as well, is that the pathways in, people's perceptions, and how people have grown their own careers has really been different on the one hand, and yet on the other hand, themes are coming through. Very, very clear themes about networking, about trying, about opening your mind as much as possible, embracing opportunity. Benjamin, something you wanted to add about qualifying, I think.
If I can.
Sure, go ahead.
There is a difference between Joe and I, fundamental one being that he's qualified and I'm not.
Interesting, go ahead.
What does that mean within property? So there are countless property individuals who are not qualified. They range from those who own the property, in which case no one cares if they're qualified or not, to those who are like myself, have a lot of experience, didn't have a property degree. I tried to qualify, I failed. There we go. That's another hiccup on the way. I failed the APC. I argue that it wasn't fair. They were mean to me, but that's beside the point. There are lots of ways of getting in there. It is important to aim to qualify, but it's also not the end of the world if a person can't. It's genuinely a lot more about your clients, and that's neither Joe nor I can probably emphasize that enough. It's about knowing people in the business.
Can we just add at this point a question that's come? In fact, we've got a few questions actually, but there's one specifically on qualifications on the banking side. Apart from the CFA, are there other professional qualifications that may be useful? I was considering something like the IMC, says Brahma. What none of the banking people would like to answer?
Yeah, Gideon unfortunately has had to break off, but we still have Sharon and Josh. I don't know if either of you have a view on that.
I was going to say, I actually sat the IMC qualification. So as part of the wealth management route or the wealth and investment management route, you have the choice by going down the CFA route or the CISI route. And the CFA route, obviously three exams, which
just in case people don't know what that is, do you want to explain what it is?
Yeah, so I'm not an expert on the CFA side of things.
What does it stand for? What does it stand for?
The Chartered Financial Analyst qualification, and there's 3 big exams that are taken, which I think you can only sit every 6 or 12 months. But on my side, because I'm dealing more with clients and portfolios, we're geared more towards the CISI, which is the Chartered Institute for Securities and Investments. So because I'm dealing with clients, because I'm dealing with portfolios in a hybrid between the two, it was more case of doing the CISI, which is more client friendly as opposed to just more quantitative stuff. So if you want to go down the wealth and investment management route, the IMC is definitely an option as part of the CISI. But also, as I said when I was speaking earlier, there are additional qualifications that your firm may require you to do. So I did the Chartered Wealth Manager qualification, which is the step up from the IMC. And it's a similar format to the CFA in terms of 3-hour written exams every 6 or 12 months. So yes, there are different routes, but depending on how qualified you want to be will dictate the amount of work that is required.
I'll add to that though, but Josh, the CFA is kind of a luxury if you're really clever qualification, while any CISI qualification, you actually need to do it for regulatory purposes. So you've done the IMC, I did the investment advice diploma, which is the IAD, but I needed to do that for my job. So I wonder then if you didn't need to do it and you just did it for fun, like not for fun, but to add to your CV.
Yeah, so the first firm I worked at was a boutique, and everyone there just did the IMC to start with. But then when I joined Investec to become level 4 regulated by the FCA, who is our regulator, then there was a separate exam in the IAD, which combined with the IMC made you compliant from a regulatory perspective. So yeah, there is the IAD as well, which is the investment advice diploma. It's very similar to the IMC, but you can mix and match across the two depending on which company you work for and what they expect you to do.
So I think what we're hearing, Brahma asked the question, and what we're hearing is that there are a lot of options, and those options, which option is the right one for you, will depend upon the environment, the role, the organization, the career pathway you want to take, many, many factors. All of that being the case, it's quite hard to give an absolute advice that this is better than that or that is better than this. It will depend upon your circumstances. I hope that, thank you, Brahma. I hope that answers your question. Does anyone else have any more questions? I mean, we've had a few submitted to us. We haven't got that long left, but does anyone else have any questions they'd like to ask any of our professionals, either our banking professionals or our property professionals or wealth management?
I've got a few in the chat, Emma.
Go ahead, Mel.
How old is too old to break into these industries? Well,
I'm not sure whether
I'm going to jump in.
I was going to say, from where I'm sitting, you, the professionals, are all very young, but I'm going to ask, Benjamin seems to want to answer that first, so why don't you go ahead?
I want to say to whoever asked that, I'm 37. I started my career at KPMG when I was 20 something or other. I can't remember how old I was. I messed around, as I said. I eventually started my property job when I was 31. I have just taken on someone with no experience who has been bringing up her children. She's 32, I think she is. No, in my humble opinion, ages in property, age does not make a difference. A willingness to work hard and a willingness to, in management I'm talking about, agency might be different, but in management it makes absolutely no difference. And you can, again, so long as you can bring in clients, you will earn the same amount within 10 years as anyone else.
That's helpful, thank you. So maybe the same on the banking side. I don't know if any of you recruit, so I think it'd be quite useful to hear from a recruitment perspective whether that makes any difference.
Well, I always have to look at CVs with regard to, if our team needs more people on it. So I'm 32, so I started when I was 21, I guess. So I guess I had that luxury of always having continuity on my CV, except for that year when I was out. But let's say my husband only started when he was 25, 26. I've got friends who are now going on returnship schemes, they're called. So a lot of places are looking into women who left the workplace because of family responsibilities who are now looking to get back into it. You can go into that at any age. To be honest, when I'm looking at a CV, I'm not looking at, no one's going to put the date they were born anymore. They're going to have just a clear indication of their experience until now. You don't need to put dates on that experience. And you can always get help from Work Avenue with regard to how you put together your CV so that people don't look at it and think, oh gosh, this person's old. And when you come for an interview, as long as it's a bit what Benjamin's saying, you're hardworking, you're going to go far, you're going to go places, you've got extra wisdom with regard to your age. So I don't think it really is an issue, especially nowadays where Corona, remote working, anything goes. So I really think it's an opportunity for everyone.
Thank you. We've got a couple more questions.
Go ahead, Mel.
Another one. A question about the hours. Are the hours really lengthy? So we often hear things about sort of working in some of the top firms, that the hours will be, not that people don't want to work long hours, but are really lengthy.
Particularly in the world of the banking culture, I would say banking culture has an absolute reputation for being horrendous for that, or great for that if you like, working long hours. Josh, what's your thought?
I think the wealth management side isn't too bad as the banking side, and the reason why is because the portfolio management side is largely dictated around when the markets are open. So the UK market opens at 8 o'clock but closes at 4:30. So it's an early wake up to make sure that you're at your desk before the stock market starts trading and clients start getting on the phone. But in terms of when the UK market shuts, which is predominantly what we're dealing with, it closes sort of late afternoon. But on the side of the relationship management side of things, obviously there are clients who want to have meetings, want to discuss things outside of market hours. But I'd have to say that in my industry, it's very rare that I'm working till 11 or 12 o'clock at night. Actually, an average day could be 8 in the morning till 6 or 7 in the evening. And occasionally you've got to expect that if something comes up at the last minute, they're prepared to work a couple more hours. I had a case not too long ago where something was thrown upon me which was unexpected, and I had to work weekends and evenings for a good probably month. But it's just the nature of the business, and if you sign up for it, you've got to expect that from time to time things will crop up.
Sure. Sharon, any perspectives on top of that? Sharon?
It has a reputation for a reason. I actually left management consultancy because management consultancy, you generally work till midnight. I was coming home in cabs every night in general. And because I ate kosher, it wasn't so fun in terms of getting a food budget because there was nothing to eat in the city. But banking is actually less so than management consultancy unless you're doing investment banking. But it's still very intense and you need to take that into account. I happen to have been doing this for 10 years now, so I now have a bit more flexibility in terms of my contract and how late I work per evening. So I do have more fixed hours, but as Josh says, you kind of got to have hands on deck. And it is something to consider, to be frank, the salaries are not as what they were pre-2007, and therefore people are complaining more and more about it, in the press, etc., because the salary to their amount of hours is not as lucrative as it used to be.
Interesting.
Thank you. Can I just get in a final question from Zach to ask the property professionals? How important is doing an APC and becoming chartered for one's career, and also tips for obtaining a summer internship? Maybe to Joe.
Sounds like one for you, Joe.
Yeah. Cheers, Zach. I think, sort of Benjamin touched on it earlier, didn't he, about sort of the importance of doing your APC. I think it's definitely worth exploring that option. As part of my APC, I rotated across 3 different departments, lasting 8 months in each, and that just sort of gave me sort of a well-rounded experience as to different sectors of the property industry, and therefore you have different experiences, you learn different skills. So from that perspective, it's really good. And as sort of touched on previously, I think the more qualified you are, it's gonna benefit you. It's gonna make you more employable in the future. So from that perspective, I also think it's great. In terms of a summer internship, obviously, you're going to have to sort of put in the graft of doing various applications for the firms you're interested in. If you do know anyone at those firms, obviously worth getting in touch with them and just sort of seeing any advice they might have as to what you should put in the application. And also, I guess another important point, which some of the other guys have touched on, is differentiate yourself. There's going to be so many sort of applications for these different job roles because it's so competitive these days. But if you've got something which is really different about you and puts you sort of apart from the rest, then that's really what you should be focusing on in your application, because the employers want to see something slightly different, and if you can offer that, then that's going to give you a good chance getting the job.
Brilliant. Thank you very, very much. Mel, do we have any more questions? I can see one from Brahma in the chat. Interesting question. is disability a barrier to working in the finance or banking space? Important question. Josh, any thoughts?
It's quite a hard one to answer from my perspective, because obviously I'm.
Have you observed anything?
Well, the one thing I would say, which is quite interesting, I was on a call not too long ago with the CEO of our company, who was giving a presentation in terms of where the business is at and what they're looking for going forward. And this is kind of linked to it, but not necessarily. And they were talking about how in our industry there's such a lack of Black investment managers. And I think that the world that we live in today, especially a lot of the larger firms, they do have these quotas now where whether it's ethnic or disability or gender or a number of different factors. So I think that companies are becoming more scrutinized for making sure that they have certain tick boxes. Let's say, for example, I haven't come across HR in that respect, so I don't really know, but okay. I just know that having heard my CEO talk about being underrepresented in certain areas, perhaps that might be something that is getting more traction than it used to.
And I think,
I can comment from Goldman
go ahead,
Sachs.
please. Go ahead, please, Sharon.
Maybe it's a big organization, but we have plenty of people who have all sorts. So they're either working shorter hours, the building is if it's a physical disability, then the building's been, all sorted for them. If it's more mental, if it's an illness, a long-term illness. Look, the inside of career progression, I think it's slightly harder because you're going to be judged against people who don't have that. But in terms of actual careers, I'm pretty sure I can look it up. The person's happy. They're welcome to contact me after the call, but I'm sure there's like a disability group of people that come into Goldman Sachs every single year.
Fantastic. I'm conscious of time, and I can see one more question in the chat, which is going to have to be our last question, from Alexander, who asks, are there opportunities at Work Avenue for a first-year uni student to get work experience in the banking industry this summer? There aren't any opportunities at Work Avenue to work in banking. No, sadly not, unfortunately, Alexander. We are able to help in a lot of different ways. Information, advice, guidance, good advice, and refer you on to other people who may be able to advise. So there's lots of ways we can help you. Unfortunately, I must be honest that we don't actually have any opportunities right now in the banking space that we can put you into for first year uni students. But if you've listened to the advice and guidance that's come through from all our professionals tonight, there are really strong themes of putting yourself out there, talking to people, finding out as much as you can, applying for anything, applying for everything, just getting it out there. And the more you do, the busier you are, without a shadow of doubt, the luckier you will be. Only, of course, it's not luck. It's all the hard work that you put into it to make it happen for yourself. And that is a theme that, our professionals have been very modest about what they've all achieved, which is fantastic to see. But, it's been as a result of lots of hard work and lots of connecting and lots of research and lots of applications as well. So do make an appointment, Alexander or anybody else. Reach out to us at Work Avenue. Mel, if you would very quickly just put our web address into the chat for everyone very, very quickly before we sign off. But you've all had emails from us, so you do know that our web address is theworkavenue.org.uk. Our phone number is 020-8371-3280. If you go onto our website, you can book appointments directly through our website. You don't even have to speak to a living human being if it's easier. Everything is possible, and we have trained, qualified professional advisors who are here to help. Lots of events, lots of networking activities, one-to-one appointments, workshop. Everything to help you narrow the odds in your favor. It's 7:02, so technically we have overrun. I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. And in particular, I very, very much want to thank our professionals who have given so much wisdom, insight, and really, really great advice on our call tonight. Gideon sadly had to leave the call a little earlier, but his advice was amazing. Also to Sharon and Josh, and to Benjamin and Joe, thank you all so much for your participation tonight. Each of you has been so helpful, so insightful, and your advice has been brilliant. So I thank you all for joining. Our last student event, wholly different. It's on Thursday night. I don't think there's much overlap. It's for HR, events management, fashion and retail. So, but if any of you are interested in those careers or know anyone who might be, they should sign up at our website. The address is on the thing, on the chat. Thank you all again for joining. Great to see you all, and goodbye.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.